Plain view doctrine. Plain view doctrine means if a police, by their own observation, observe an item of criminal evidence in plain view, the police may seize the item without a warrant. So that is what we mean by plain view doctrine. We are going to discuss some specific requirements for invoking this doctrine of plain view. We are going to start from this first case, that is Arizona versus Hicks. In this case, mainly we discuss one of the requirements for invoking the plain view doctrine. So one of the requirements for invoking the doctrine is that the police must be lawfully in a position to observe the item in question. Meaning is this police observation, when the police did this observation, the police must be lawfully in that position. It could not be the police did something illegal to begin with, and then they're going to say, we want to seize this item under the plain view doctrine. So the police cannot do that. So the first requirement is the police must be lawfully in a position to observe the item in question. Now let's look at what happened in this Arizona versus Hicks. In the case, there was a shooting in an apartment building, and then someone was injured. So the police responded to the call. So the police went to the apartment where this shot was fired. And it is important for us to understand why the police entered the apartment. The police entered the apartment for three purposes. One was to look for the shooter. The second one was to look for other victims. The third one is to look for the weapon or the weapons. And so that were the three purposes why the police entered the apartment. It is important for you to remember these three purposes for the police entering the apartment, because later on these three purposes would be very important in our analysis of the case. And then what happened after this police entered the apartment, and then one of the police officers noticed an expensive stereo components, two sets of expensive stereo components. And the police officer suspected these components and could be stolen. But of course, the police officer did not have a probable cause to believe they were stolen. So the police officer just moved this equipment so that he could record these serial numbers. So after the police officer recorded the serial numbers, he reported the numbers back to the police headquarters. And then in the police headquarters, and after police checking these serial numbers, and then it was confirmed this equipment was stolen, and then the police officer seized this equipment at that point. So that is basically what happened in the case. The legal issue in the case was whether this seizure of this stereo equipment could be justified under the plain view doctrine. The ruling of the court in the case was the police seizure of this stereo equipment could not be justified under the plain view doctrine. Why the court said this seizure could not be justified under the plain view doctrine? The reason was the reason was this: the basic ruling of the court was the police moving of the stereo equipment was an illegal search. So we know, we already said, if the police conducted an illegal search to begin with, and then they could not really justify their seizure under the Plainview doctrine. So the court here just said this police moving of this stereo system was an illegal search. So of course, because of this illegal search, police officer obtained this serial number, and then they confirmed this they checked this serial number and confirmed the system was stolen. But because this serial number was obtained in an illegal search, so this seizure could not be justified under the Plainview doctrine. Now let's see why this police seizure was this police search, this police moving of the stereo system was an illegal search. The first one was this. The court said the police did not have a probable cause to believe the system was stolen. This point we already discussed. When the police first saw this stereo equipment over there, they just thought it was out of place in such apartment, and then there were such expensive stereo components over there, so the police officer just thought it was suspicious, but they did not have a probable cause to believe the system was stolen for sure. So if a police did not have this probable cause, and then they could not really conduct a search. We all know that, because according to Fourth Amendment, to conduct a search, police need probable cause. If they only had suspicion, of course, they could not really conduct a search. So on this point, because police did not have a probable cause, and then they moved this stereo system, and then this moving of the system was a search, so that was a search without probable cause. Of course, that is the first point the court made on this issue. The second one is this. The court said the police, by moving this stereo system, the police went beyond the reasonable scope of the search. By moving of this stereo system, the police went beyond the reasonable scope of the search. Why we say that? Now we need to recall why the police entered the apartment. The police entered the apartment for three purposes. They went over there to look for the shooter, the victims, and the weapons. And then, but the police, if you recall our discussion of this scope analysis, we know by moving the stereo system, the police could not find a shooter, could not find any victims, and could not find any weapons. So the police certainly had no business moving this stereo system. Just like we discussed before, if a police went to an apartment to look for a stolen bicycle, they could not really open like a cookie jar or something like that. So the same analysis. The police went in over there to look for the shooter, for the potential victims, and for weapons. But by moving this stereo system around, but by checking these serial numbers, they could not really find a shooter, they could not find a victim, they could not find a weapon. So because of that analysis, the police here went beyond the reasonable scope of this particular search. So that means that this was another way to say the police action of moving the stereo system was illegal. So based on this analysis, the conclusion of the court was the police conducted an illegal search by moving this stereo equipment. So because the police conducted this illegal search, and then they obtained this serial number as a result of an illegal search. So this seizure of the stereo system could not be justified under the Plainview doctrine, because once again we need to emphasize, to invoke the Plainview doctrine, the police must make sure the police must make sure they were lawfully in a position to observe the item. But in this case, apparently the police did not satisfy this requirement. They obtained this serial number as a result of an illegal search, so they could not really say later they want to seize this serial equipment under the plain view doctrine.